Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm especially pleased to host this conference here today on such a topic of major importance. My name is Jytte Guteland, and I'm the co-chair of one of the working groups in the Intergroup of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development. And I'm actually stepping in for my colleague, Pavel Pock, who is vice chair of this intergroup, who unfortunately was not able to be here today. But he sent his warmest regards and is following this discussion very closely. So I would like to pass on that. My colleague from the ALDE group, chair of another working group and fellow Swede, Fredrick, is here, and it's nice to see you. On behalf of Pavel, Fredrick and me, I thank you all for attending this conference, and I see by many that we are many here today, so you share the interest. I'm very happy to see so many here, and I hope for a very fruitful discussion. And I also would like to give a special welcome, of course, to the Commissioner Guteland, who joined us for the first part of the discussion. This intergroup that I mentioned has played a key role, an important role, to kick off the discussions earlier on, and took a very important role in the discussions on marine litter, especially via the organization of plenty successful conferences similar to today. 1 year ago, this intergroup kicked off the discussions at a conference called Marine Plastics Need European Action. And it was Commissioner Vella who attended at that time. During the 12 past month, the intergroup had held further events who addressed the risks and the potentials of biodegradable plastics, as well as the effect of marine litter on fisheries and oceans, fostering the dialogue between the EU institutions, NGOs, and the fisheries community. I believe the intergroup plays a very key role here to take this question seriously. As you very well know, the problem with marine litter is a transboundary by nature, of course. Litters simply don't know any borders. They move in the marine environment, and therefore litter originating from one country affect others. And moreover, plastics are widely available today, persistent, and they often have a toxic and widely big harmful impact. Europe is now acting to improve its own environmental footprint and reduce plastic litter in our European seas. The Commission has produced both the European Strategy for Plastics in Circular Economy and recently also the proposal that every one of us was very involved with, of course, to reduce consumption on certain single-use plastic products. Although I think that the proposals could have been even stronger from the beginning, and we will see that the final results will eventually be for the single-use products. I want to commend the Commission for taking action, and I believe this is important first steps. Overall, I see that there are strong willingness, both at the European level, but also in the Member States, to take firm action towards plastic pollution. Because let us not kid ourselves. The situation is really problematic, and we need to ramp up our actions to change the current trend. The Mediterranean is today the sea with the highest concentration of plastic litter in the world. But this is also a global problem, as you all know. If nothing is done, we will actually have more plastic than fish in the water in 2050. And this is also the Commission pointed out to be a really serious problem. I think many of you was also shocked the other day when learning about the whale found in Indonesia, with more than 6 kilos of different plastic in its body. In all this tragedy, this is a very recent image of how marine life is affected by plastic litter and why we must stop this madness. We also know that the litter can actually that we actually see is only the tip of the iceberg, while a far bigger problem is not shown. We also know that there is a very big problem with microplastics. Although it's invisible to the naked eye, microplastics are present in the maritime environment around us and was recently found also in humans. Studies has revealed that these microplastics also act as magnets for other substances in our seas. For example, persistent organic pollutants which remain in the environment even longer when sticking to these microplastic particles. Unfortunately, I think the Commission has not been as good in tackling this problem, the same also goes to many of these damaging chemicals that are found in plastics, not at least endocrine disruptors. The Parliament is still waiting for concrete horizontal measures from the Commission to show how and when the endocrine disruptors present also in plastic will be tackled. But those were just some small observations from my side, and maybe some food for thought for the discussion today, and also for the Commissioner present. It is also clear that Europe cannot solve this problem with litter alone. Therefore, the Intergroup has successfully brought the global perspective on the ocean governance into the European Parliament when discussing the SDG 14 and the CBD Sustainable Ocean Initiative together, both with the UN bodies and the UN bodies like the UN Environment and the FAO. That is a very clever way to act forward to tackle the global problem. Building up on the above success at the EU level, we are here today to exchange ideas with all the key stakeholders, moreover to see what we can further do to jointly tackle plastic pollution in our oceans for the common good. As a result, this will not be the last conference on this matter, as many aspects are still to be debated. With that, I will hand over to Fredrick, and thank you for now, and we will continue to have the discussion later.
Thank you so much, Jytte. As you can see, the intergroups also work between the different parties, and we try to make sure that we have a leverage in all our different political groups to actually make a change. I agree with basically everything that Jytte said on the topic. I'd like to just make a few short additions to that one. One is, in the work that we are doing internationally, I think it will be a much bigger debate the forthcoming years on how Europe, as a rich part of the world, can aid in improving waterways in the other parts of the world and also sewer systems. Because we do know that more developed sewer systems also makes it easier to make sure that plastic that goes astray is actually collected and gathered and handled in a proper way. I also think that we will see a much wider discussion on the use of plastics and the meaning of Europe as the biggest market in the world actually setting standards. The critics are saying the European litter, it's so little, it doesn't make any difference. But I will tell you now why it makes a difference. If the biggest market in the world can make a change, so can other parts of the world. That's one part of it. But also, it's not just the little litter coming from Europe, which actually do exist, but there's also a lot of the goods that we export to other countries that becomes litter in other parts of the world. there are also two parts which are very, very important why the biggest market in the world should set the standard and show that a transition here is both needed and actually possible to do. And to my view, also as a free marketeer, I am very, very convinced that we can make this transition also in a way that makes sure that we continue our growth, because some of the critics says this will hamper the growth in Europe and it will hamper the growth for businesses. I say that there are many business opportunities coming also with this transition. We know that the Commissioner has a very, very tight schedule today. He has to leave at 1 o'clock sharply for another very important appointment. But we're glad that you're taking your time to be here. There will just be a few short words before I hand the word over to you. If there is not time for questions, we do apologize for this. We hope there will be some questions in the end, but we have to respect that the Commissioner has to leave at 1 o'clock sharply, so that's why I'm not having a longer intervention than this. With these words, I'll leave the word to my dear colleague Maria Spyraki. The floor is yours.
I'm committed that I will be very, very brief. Thank you very much for being with us today. It is clear that we need a strengthened policy approach to tackle marine litter, underpinned by circular economy solution, and such mechanism as we are discussing here today, extended producer responsibility, and wider application of the eco-modulation of EPR fees can play an important role in achieving this. EPR is intended to achieve environmental improvements throughout the product life cycle and two primary environment goals. First, it is to provide incentives for manufacturers to design resource-efficient and low-impact products, eco-design is so-called, and the second is to ensure effective end-of-life collection, environmentally sound treatment of collected products, and improvement reuse and recycling. We have 26 of 28 member states that they have some form of EPR in place for packaging waste as recommended by the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive. Eco-design can also be promoted when EPR schemes are coupled with policies and set requirements based on waste weight rather than on units consumed. Intensified producer to design lighter products. Despite all this, EPR advantage, more efforts certainly need to be made in this area to encourage far wider application of eco-design measures. The difference in existing schemes and the general lack of data, they both contribute to such limits. Moreover, recycling targets alone might not represent the best way to determine the internalization of cost. I mean, separate collection targets should also be considered as EPR schemes cover separate collections and treatment costs, but not mixed waste collection. Modulation of fees is another parameter. Based on the recyclability of plastic, would provide a significant driver for eco-design and should have the knock-on effect on increasing recycling rates, generating more secondary raw material, we need them, and facilitating the use of recycling content. With the new plastic strategy, Vice President Katainen will speak to this right now, is profitable for business by setting new rules on packages to improve recyclability of plastics and increase the demand of recycled plastic contents. Thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to work jointly on the policy design that will allow unlocking the potential of extended producer responsibility mechanism to change the status quo. Thank you very much once again. Vice President, the floor is yours.
Oh, first, sorry, Maria.
Yeah.
First, we just have a short intervention from Françoise Bonnet from the EPR Club Secretariat, making this arrangement also possible for all of us to attend.
Thank you very much. I will be very short, don't worry. I just want to thank, of course, everybody to be here, and especially the EBCD for making this event possible, and my colleagues from the EPR Club. The EPR Club was launched in June 2012 already on the initiative of 5 ACR Plus members and with the patronage of the former Commissioner, Mr. Potočnik. Through the 6 years of its existence, the EPR Club has grown into a unique multi-stakeholders platform for exchange of information on EPR in Europe, gathering representatives of all actors of the value chain, including public authorities, but also producer responsibility organizations, waste management companies, producer material federation, and NGOs. All EU countries and different types of products covered by EPR, not only packaging. The EPR Club is today de facto the European platform that the Commission has proposed and that is included in the final text of the Waste Framework Directive. The European institutions, the Parliament and the Commission, have been participating in many activities organised by the EPR Club and have seen the value it brings in furthering EU policy development and technical implementation of EPR systems throughout Europe. So we are calling on the institutions to continue supporting the EPR Club at the European platform on EPR. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Françoise. With no further ado, we are grateful that the Vice President of the Commission, Jytte Guteland, is able to be here today. You're not only representing the Commission today, but you're also representing your personal involvement in this issue, because I know that they're dear to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me first thank the Intergroup and the Working Group for inviting me to this event and also to organizing this event. It's very positive, and I personally appreciate a lot that European Parliament has a working group dealing with circular economy and Intergroup, which is looking at the climate change and biodiversity, sustainable development from the wider perspective. I'm saying this because I believe that there are two major mega trends in the world economy in coming years. The first one is artificial intelligence, and the second one is circular economy. The two supposed to be the ones to which the future Commission, next Commission, but also the next Parliament supposed to put a lot of emphasis. Because I believe that it's good for our well-being, but also welfare, because we need to make sure that our economy is geared towards the highest possible added value. And in this respect, the circular economy plays a crucial role. Not only, I mean, I didn't even mention the environmental benefits, but I just took very, very strictly the economic perspective when saying this. So let me say a couple of words on the EU's on the UN SDGs first. As we all know, the EU is committed to implementing UN Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, Goal 12 to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns, and Goal 14 that calls to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas and marine resources for sustainable development. So the two are the most relevant for today's discussion. In this context, you will recall that earlier this year the new EU waste legislation came into force and introduced new obligations for member states to take measures to prevent and clean up all marine litter. And as a reminder, we also have existing marine legislation that requires member states to take measures against litter to achieve good status of our marine waters. The plastics strategy that we adopted in January this year envisages a policy vision and measures to protect the environment from plastic pollution, whilst fostering growth and innovation, turning a challenge into a positive agenda for the future of Europe. There is a strong business case for transforming the way products are designed, produced, used and recycled in the EU. By taking the lead in this transition, we will create new investment opportunities and jobs. Let me recall the main elements of plastics strategy in reducing plastic pollution in the environment. First, all plastic packaging on the EU market will be recyclable by 2030. Second, the consumption of single-use plastics will be reduced. And third, the intentional use of microplastics will be restricted. Every year, Europeans generate 25 million tons of plastic waste, but less than 30% is collected for recycling. Across the world, plastics makes up 85% of beach litter. In the work on the plastics strategy, we carefully analyzed the sources and content of plastic marine pollution. As a follow-up, in May this year, the Commission came out with a proposal for the directive to tackle plastic pollution on the environment for targeting the most littered items in the EU: single-use plastic products and plastic fishing gear. Together, they represent 70% of all plastic marine litter on EU beaches. Therefore, the Commission's proposal is both ambitious and proportional. The objective of the proposal is to reduce the impact of plastic on the aquatic environment, both through preventive policies such as product design requirements, marketing bans, labelling and awareness raising, as well as improved waste management policies like separate collection and extended producer responsibility. The measures we propose are tailored to individual items so that they deliver the greatest possible impact. The instrument of extended producer responsibility is a key mechanism to improve waste prevention, in particular by promoting product design changes, reusable products and awareness raising. It also contributes to improved waste management, in particular by better out-of-home collection of waste and cleaning up litter. The producer can and should do more, in line with the polluter pays principle. The costs of cleaning the litter cannot be borne solely by the public sector. We have to find a reasonable balance here. The EPR principle, already long established for waste management, is now directly linked with littering and firmly embedded in our new waste legislation and our single-use plastics proposal. Some of the plastic litter items that we most frequently find on our beaches are already covered by producer responsibility provisions, and we propose to make this coverage more comprehensive, covering all key polluters. Important to underline, we strongly support the notion of EPR in all international fora, where we join our forces with our neighbours and partners to fight plastic pollution of our seas and coasts. We also have to acknowledge that using EPR needs to be responsible. We cannot create or encourage irresponsible behaviour of individuals. Litter from products of a given branded global company is the same whether in Europe, in Southeast Asia or in Arctic, so we do not see why it should be treated differently. We have said so clearly in G7, and we will repeat it in the United Nations, where efforts to improve global governance against marine litter are being stepped up. Let me underline once again, all our actions are not aimed against plastics. They target the unsustainable use of some plastic items. We are focusing on items that are major contributors to marine litter. Our single-use plastics proposal should be seen above all as a win-win deal for our environment and the economy. We tackle the first source of pollution. This proposal will help businesses and consumers to innovate towards sustainable alternatives and at the same time give the EU market a competitive edge in the global market for sustainable products and business models. We are offering the EU single market that is at the heart of this proposal. I can confirm that this is now a priority legislative initiative for the Commission. Hence, I am all the more glad to hear that both co-legislators have shown the political will to conclude the negotiations on this important legislation by the end of this year. The problem of marine litter is high on the political agenda and a #1 concern of European citizens. Citizens have big expectations on this initiative, and I believe industry is prepared for this challenge that will also deliver more innovations, jobs and competitiveness. But we are well aware that the challenge is global. In September, in New York, we started our race to the top in the United Nations by launching the Global Plastic Forum. We will use the new avenues of cooperation that the forum opens for discussing and implementing with those concerned our vision of more circularity and less pollution in the oceans, and how global players can contribute in a way that matches their means and responsibilities. So, ladies and gentlemen, our proposed legislation is a great opportunity for Europe to lead the way in a global fight against marine litter. And the EPR concept is an indispensable part of its success. So I wish you a very good day today. I appreciate the work MEPs are doing in this file, and I do appreciate that you have managed to gather together such an impressive group of people who are involved in circular economy and in environmental protection, because this is the only way we can exchange ideas and share best practices and develop new ones. Thank you very much.
Since we were a bit late in the start, we actually don't have the time, 1 minute for a question. I know you probably were prepared to put them forward to the Vice President of the Commission, but he really needs to leave at 1 o'clock, and that was also one of the deals for making it possible for him to come, that he had to leave at 1 o'clock. But thank you so much, Vice President.
Thank you very much.
Without any further ado, we will go into the next panel, and it will be chaired by Jytte Guteland. I myself have to run away because we have a little bit of a topic on the general food law, which has to be sorted out before the vote next week. So thank you all for being here, and Jytte, the floor and show is yours.
Thank you, Fredrick, and I'm honored to have the privilege to lead this first panel of today's discussions. And I welcome the panel up so that you can join me. And the topic is EPR as a driver for this circularity of packaging, and we will have an interesting discussion here. And let's see, Sylvia. Yeah, I will just welcome them, and then we will start. I will just present the name and of the panel, but I will do it and give the floor immediately because we are many in this panel, so that we will try to be stricter on time this time. And I will give everyone in this panel 5 minutes for their introduction, and then hopefully we can have the exchange with you who participates here today, so that you can ask questions now instead. So I will start by handing over to Ms. Sylvia Eil, the European Commission, DG Environment, and you will have your 5 minutes here in the panel. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. It's hard to follow Guteland's speech, but I'll try not to repeat too much, but give from our perspective the key elements of our policy, existing policy, and the future policy that that is targeting marine litter. So I think first of all I'd like to recall that we have just recently agreed on very ambitious waste legislation. So we adopted it in May, came into force in July, that adopts quite significant measures on prevention and waste management that are directly linked also to the impact on marine litter. So first of all, I'd like to mention the prevention measures that are there. So actually member states, when the directive is transposed in 2020, have to take preventive measures that aim to halt the generation of marine litter. as a contribution to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. And this is a very ambitious objective because the members have to take measures to ensure that there is no more additional marine litter entering our environment. That's an aim, but it is very clear that those measures have to be identified and they have to be implemented and they have to be reflected in the member states' waste prevention programs. The second, I would also like to mention that in terms of waste management, there's also very clear measures now asking member states to take measures to clean up and tackle all types and all marine litter. And again, these are member states have to set up very specific measures in their waste management plans. And then in terms of other objectives, so as you well know, we have strengthened the obligations on separate collection of waste. And we have also strengthened the recycling objectives in our waste legislation. So that means these measures will also be a strong driver to ensure that more waste is actually collected, in particular separate collection of plastic waste. Which clearly is also the waste that we're talking about here, single-use items that are used on the go consumption, and therefore we envisage a quite significant improvement that needs to happen on separate collection of the on-the-go consumption waste. And if I can zoom in relation to the EPR, so as it was already mentioned, it is a well-established concept in the member states. We have applied it for many different products, and it actually works. And in this latest waste review, we have significantly strengthened this concept by laying down some ground rules to make sure that there is good governance of these schemes and that they are also cost efficient. And some of the key elements of those rules is to make sure that the producers actually pay the full cost of waste management of these products. Again, the emphasis here is on that they should ensure that they are separately collected. And the second element is the modulation of fees requirement, that the fees in relation to the products have to reflect their waste management impact. And, well, do the EPR schemes address littering issue? Well, currently they don't, beyond the separate collection obligations. So that is the reason why we have come up with additional measures in the proposal on single-use plastics that we adopted earlier this year. And why it is not addressing, because we have general separate collection obligations, but very often they focus on the home consumption, and there is really a need to improve the out-of-home collection of waste. And it is also, of course, inevitable that some waste escapes the collection systems, and that is the key gap that we are trying to address now with the new proposal on single-use plastics, to make sure that on the out-of-home consumption and collection of waste, there is a responsibility also for the producer. It is not the responsibility of the public authorities and the public at large. It's really that obligation should be on the consumers of those products, and this can be implemented the simplest way through the polluter pays principle, through the extended producer responsibility. Now, the circularity of packaging, of course, will also be addressed in the packaging directive. We have a clear commitment in the packaging directive that in 2020 we will review the essential requirements for packaging products in view to bring them in line with the circular economy principles. And but I would also like to say that in this aspect, of course, we can make the packaging more reusable, we can make it more recyclable, but at the end of the day, if it escapes the collection systems, it would still end up as litter. So that is why, again, we need to see, need to have an ambitious measures through targeting specifically those items that are the main sources of marine litter. And the single-use plastics proposal, we have identified those products, and we have identified the measures that most effectively address those products and the litter and the plastic pollution that they present. And those measures and the directive as such is designed to have an ambitious EU action, so that we also avoid market fragmentation in member states, depending what measures they take and which products they target. So we want a common approach in the member states in the products we target and the measures we take. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was very interesting, and I'm also I'm sure that you will get lots of questions later on. But now I would like to present once again Françoise Bonnet, Secretary General of ACR Plus. Yeah, and this time hopefully you will have a little bit more time, even though we still restrict it, but you will have a little bit. Don't feel the stress when you talk, at least. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will give you some insight regarding the public authorities' point of view, and more specifically the local and regional authorities, meaning close to the citizens that are also consumer. We do believe that, of course, collection infrastructure is essential. Municipalities should offer comprehensive collection service to their citizens for all packaging and to be reimbursed for that. So, of course, we advocate for a full cost coverage of those services through EPR. And linked to that, we always forget, but speaking about marine litter, municipalities, they have also to be aware that they need to have wastewater management plans. It's not directly our concern regarding packaging, but yes, with microplastic, etc., we know that they need to combine both. It is broadly assumed that approximately 80% of marine litter is land-based, with regional fluctuation, of course, but within this, it is estimated that plastic accounts for over 80% of marine litter, and within this, 60% of packaging. So for sure, collection is important, and the municipalities should secure this and should also secure the cost of this. So it's not only selective collection, but also the cost, how to be reimbursed, and including the quantities they collect to clean the littering, so the cost of littering. And like that, we can have good data to advocate for a full cost coverage. A second point that we would like also to emphasize is that the fact that EPR should be understood in the broadest way. So not focusing only on EPR schemes, and it's not only about placing all the burden on producers, because many stakeholders are involved and each has a role to play. However, producers have a key role to play because they can design the product and they can also give an economic value to the packaging waste. So very important. We know that we still a lot of items that we can collect, but still important to include also packaging design and awareness raising. And regarding awareness raising, we think that there is a clear need to raise all stakeholders' awareness and stakeholder behavior change in a quick and an efficient manner. It means that using economic and legal instruments like EPR. Money is always money. So if you can offer something to your consumer or citizens, it will make the difference. And that's why we have two different important points that we would like to defend and maybe discuss with you. A clear need to give more value to the recyclates. We have just signed a common letter with a lot of other signatories, and I think a lot of them are present here. We think that if we want to have an efficient EPR system, we need to include recycled plastic into new products. So it's really important to have a clear obligation regarding that. Another thing, and we see it with our members, different members of ACR Plus wanted to and studied the feasibility to implement DRS, so deposit refund systems. This is a clear manner to have back our items and to give value to the littering, because when you see a lot of PET bottles on the beach, when you see that you can have money back when giving back these bottles, it's simple. You do it. You don't throw away, or at least someone will take it and have the money back. So we do believe that we have to reconsider, because when I was a child it was more considered than now, deposit refund system as a part of this EPR principle. Really, really important. And last point, we have a very good opportunity with this single-use plastic directive now. Please don't miss this appointment. Be ambitious. 90% collection rate for PET bottles should be in this directive to make a change, and mandatory recycled content. Thank you.
Bravo.
I agree. Two important speeches here from both the Commission and now the public authorities. But now we will go on and we will introduce from the panel the producer responsibility organizations. And I think we have three of you here. And I will start with Helmut Schmidt, the Director Communication Public Affairs at DCD, and then I will hand over to you, Sarah Guemes Santos, Liberia Program Coordinator at ECOEMS, and then Miguel Munoz, sorry, there you are, of course, Liberia Program Coordinator at Seabird Life. So I will give the floor to you, and then you hand over. So welcome all three of you. 5 minutes each.
Yeah, thank you very much for the nice welcome. I will stay in the 5 minutes so that we have time for discussion with my three main conclusions I would like to make. I'm a representative of an EPR. It's the oldest one, not only in Europe but worldwide. We were set up in 1990, so it's nearly 30 years ago. And we are really happy to see that the principle of EPR is spreading, is moving in other countries, because we think it's a key element of a solution. So what are my three main conclusions? First one, well, I have to move this one as well. Okay, thank you. EPR is a key lever to close the loop for packaging, and therefore the right instrument to tackle the problem of marine littering at source. So that's my first conclusion. What does it mean? I've one slide to illustrate that a little bit. The principle requires industry, I mean this is the meaning of EPR, to take responsibility for sustainable post-consumption management, and that's new, post-consumption management of packaging. It is based on legislation, very important, creating a level playing field, even more important. This triggers investments in collecting, sorting, recovery, recycling infrastructure. One thing is clear, the best, and I focus on plastic waste because that is the main problem in the ocean. One thing is clear, I think. The best plastic waste is the one that does not arise in the first place. We all know that. The second best solution is plastic waste, which is understood as a raw material and recycled and used in a circular economy. So used packaging is no longer waste, but a valuable resource. Unfortunately, this principle is not in our economy today, and this is what we have to change. This tackles the problem of littering at source. You will not throw away what you value. And Françoise was mentioning it already. And we have a deposit scheme for nearly 15 years now, 25 cents on each bottle. And that is a return rate of 96%, because if you do not hand it back, other people will do that. EPR can be a strong incentive for eco-design of packaging. And you can see it on my slide. It's the picture in the first row on the right side. There are really successful examples on the market. Unfortunately, they are what we call light towers. It's not enough, but they prove that it works. Debate upon eco-modulation of EPR fees is an ongoing national. We have this in our new German packaging legislation by January 1st next year, and as well as on the EU level, a very important discussion. And we have to have in mind that 40% of the world plastic production is used for packaging, so it's not a minor issue. And if we look into the figures of plastic waste, we find 60% of plastic waste is packaging. So improving the recyclability of packaging is an important step to close the loop. And you see, I mentioned that in my third conclusion on the right side already, that we need dialogue and that we need working along the value chain. And that brings me to my second conclusion. EPR will not work in isolation. And that is my experience of 25 years now. We have to talk. We need the dialogue. And full circularity of packaging requires joint action along the value chain. And that is really, really missing. Closing the loop for packaging requires coordinated action along the entire value chain. I think I have a second one. And it looks complex. It is complex because there are a lot of relations between all these different stakeholders. On the right side, you see some of examples that we can imagine that we practice already. I would like to highlight a little bit the photo on the right side where you see all these young people. We have started to invite students from universities that are in the master programs of becoming packaging engineers. We invited the marketing people. We invited colleagues from other European countries to bring all of them together to find a solution for this complex issue. So we need holistic solutions and incentives. And therefore, it's a plea to find also incentives, financial incentives to drive it. And we think a CO2 price, for example, that favors sustainable products and packaging could be a nice driver, an economic driver. Why not? Let's think in that direction. And it is clearly a better alternative to banning products. Incentives would also stimulate investments in the circular flow economy. So bring market and the environmental goals together, and that's a strong force. So we need to continue our research here and to be innovative. We have already a lot of best practice examples and initiatives out there that underpin how important and essential dialogue and cooperation between producers, EPR schemes, public authorities and consumers is. And Françoise mentioned the EPR Club. We are a member of this EPR Club, and it's really a good basis for exchange from all these different stakeholder worlds. And let me, because I'm running out of my 5 minutes, what we are still missing in a country that has started quite early with collecting everything with full producer responsibility, so industry pays for nearly 30 years all the costs for collection, sorting and recycling. But what we're still missing is an increased demand from industry for recyclates. So if we ask the people to collect and we sort it and we recycle it, we need the markets. Big, big problem, and we hope that something is going on in the near future. Let me finish with my third conclusion. EPR should be further developed based on European EPR experiences. And in our government, we had a lot of problems and a lot of dialogue. You might have read that in the news, in the newspapers and in the news. But there is one thing that we really, really welcome very much. EPR and circular economy is now integrated in all the programs with the Ministry of Economic Development. And I was invited as an expert last month to Indonesia, which is one of the hot topic countries with polluting the ocean, 17,000 islands, 270 million people. And it was a really fruitful conference with European experts and participants from the ASEAN state groups, 10 countries, 650 million people. And it was a really good kickoff, not by saying you have to do it like we do it in Europe, but just to exchange the experience, to create the awareness, because this is a good investment. We should follow on. So let me be clear again, no one-to-one transfer solutions. That would not work. But Europe is the home of EPR and circular economy innovations for many, many years. And let's share that knowledge and let's share this experience with other parts of the world. Thank you.
The presentation? Oh, yeah, I see it. Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you, all of you, for assistance to this conference. First of all, I want to tell you that I am not an EPR producer. I'm a worker on an NGO. It's BirdLife. BirdLife, we are a partner of BirdLife in Spain. We are the Spanish Society for Protection Birds. And we have been working during more than 60 years protecting birds and their habitat. And why I am here? This is because we started like 2 years ago, something like that, one project with Ecoembes, who is the EPR company in Spain. It is a very good project, good best practice example of how can an NGO can join with the EPR company to fight against littering. Okay. With Libera, basically, we want to conscientize people that when you are dropping waste, when you are dropping littering, it is not only an aesthetic problem. It is pollution. You are contaminated the nature. I think this is the very important message that we have to give the society as a conservation NGO. To do that, we are focusing in 3 different areas. We are a scientific NGO. That means that we are studying with science. So for us, knowledge is basic. We need knowledge to communicate everything. We need knowledge to create, to know how big is the problem. So I will start with this. Sorry. We work in two different ways with scientific programs. Yeah. One of them is in BirdLife, all the monitoring projects with birds are done by volunteers. That is because citizen science is a very, very huge tool that brings us the possibility to give to all the society an APP mobile, and they can monitor birds. So it is working very good with birds, so we ask ourselves, why not do it with waste? So we create an APP, and people can go to their natural places and not only collect waste, they can also tell us which kind of waste they find with a very simple APP. So all of these data give us a good example, good print of what is the littering we can find in 3 different ecosystems. So in September, we are focusing more in littering, marine litter in beaches and seas. In December, we are rolling more in countryside, forests and mountains. And in March, it is focused in rivers. So the methodology is very similar, but it's not exactly the same. That is why we split in 3 different weeks and 3 different events. So you can see here that in our first year of project, the participation was very successful. More than 3,000 volunteers participate, 22 tons of litter collected, 35,000 items are now in our data, BC data. But it is not the only. We need to know what is happening with littering. Now we know what is the littering you can find in the surface, but we want to know what is happening with this littering. How is the relationship between nature and this waste? So we started 1 month ago one ambitious project. In Spain, we have more than 400 IVAs. The IVA is the important bird of areas. It is also important areas for nature in general. So we select 140, representing more the 7 ecosystems more important in Spain. So on those places, we are going to take samples of ground, of water, and also of excrement of carnivores, if possible, animals in general. And we want to measure what can we find inside, what chemistry we can find, what potential toxins we can find. In this way, we have the two visions of the problem. One is what can we find in the surface, and the other is what can we find in the ground, in the water, and the excrement. And maybe we can make a relationship and to know exactly how contaminate littering in nature. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Sara from Ecoembes, EPR in Spain. Thank you very much for coming. We invited Miguel also because we wanted you all to know that working, as Helmut said, working together with, for example, this one NGO, it's a very big and ambitious project, but we all together are working in Spain for getting more and more awareness in our citizens. So we are very happy both to be here. Thank you very much. Of course, knowledge is the base, but why not explaining to our citizens what else or how they can not litter the spaces. I don't know why this is not working. I don't. Yeah. All right. Of course, with the basis of the knowledge, we do prevention. We act in education and, of course, in awareness. What do we do in education for 1 year? For 1 year and a half now, we are already in 400 schools in Spain and in different universities, telling them what is the problem and how they can participate. Of course, we do awareness campaigns for them to know what is going on, what is the problem. As Miguel said, it's not an aesthetic problem, but is a pollution problem. Yeah. The first thing we create in Spain, in Spain we don't like English terms, or we don't use them. So what we create is littering, but in Spain. What it was is basuraleza, which is the name between basura, which is litter, and naturaleza, which is nature. Yes, so we mix it up and we created basuraleza. I'm going to explain to you exactly what happened. Littering is an English word, of course, and only the 15% of Spain knew what was going on, what was that problem, yeah? So what we said is, okay, let's give them a word for them to understand what exactly is the problem. At least let's them to know what there is a problem, yes? So Basuraleza worked out, and now we did a sociological study, and we create from 15% to 83% of knowledge of the problem. So we've got a lot of work going on, but at least we've got the knowledge of the problem already in their heads. One more thing, sorry. I don't know. Yeah. No. We also work, as I said, with the schools and universities, but we also work with natural parks. What we are doing is going there and working with the educational people who are in the parks, and tell them what is the problem for the visitors, for them to tell the visitors what is the problem and what is the solution. So we are working with there. We are also working with the ministry. We are working with regional governments. We are working with municipalities, for all working together, or our stakeholders. And as my colleague said, not working in isolation, but in a group, all together, as it is supposed their responsibility. Of course, me as Ecoembes, as EPR in Spain, of course, we think, and here are my 3 conclusions, we are part of the solution, of course, from the awareness, from the collaboration, public and private collaboration, as I already told you. And we all must meet our responsibilities in this problem of litter, marine litter, or all the littering we have. In Spain, Ecoembes is working beyond what the law asks us to do. So we are working, of course, in awareness campaigns, but we are also working in eco-design. We've created 1 year and a half before TCL, which is the Circular Lab, which is a place where there are people thinking and rethinking how we should create our packaging, and how are doing our best, of course, beyond the law, as already said, asks us. Of course, as Miguel and I have already told you, we are with Libera working beyond the cities. We are working in nature. So we are very proud of presenting this project to you. You can see more in our website, and I invite you, of course, to do it. But one more thing, the last thing I want to say is that Ecoembes, before working with the NGO Silver Life in Spain, we've been like 4, 5, or 6 years before working with different collective, all the actors involved. For example, we already work with fishing, litter fishing, with fishermen and all those areas. So we are very proud to continue working in this material, doing awareness and improving, of course. Why not? And of course, what we are doing against litter, marine litter, or littering in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez-Santos, and thank you also, Mr. Smith and Mr. Munoz, for excellent introductions. And now I will hand over to Ms. Levi Alvarez, European Coordination of the Break Free from Plastic movement at Zero Waste Europe. Thank you so much for attending. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. I'm not schizophrenic, but I have something like 3 identities. So I work at Zero Waste Europe. I'm the coordinator of the Break Free from Plastic movement in Europe and the Rethink Plastic Alliance in Brussels. And this is not working. Yeah, I'm going down to the next slide. Yes. So Rethink Plastic is the alliance of the 10 leading NGOs working at the European level on plastic policy. We represent thousands of active groups, supporters and citizens in every EU member state, and we have expertise all along the plastics value chain, because we do believe that the plastic pollution issue doesn't start when plastic enters the ocean. It starts when the raw material is extracted and plastic is produced. We are the EU policy arm of the Break Free from Plastic movement. It's the global movement of NGOs working to build a future free from plastic pollution. And we have about 1,400 members all over the world on the 6 continents. And so today we're talking about producer responsibility. In the last 10 minutes we've heard about awareness raising, but I would like actually to bring the topic back to what producers can do in the EPR system to really tackle plastic pollution at source. Where EPR schemes have not helped circular economy so far. So it's actually an interesting question because we need to define what we mean by circular economy. And for us, it's really aligned with the waste hierarchy. So you start by preventing waste, then you incentivize reuse, then recycling, and then you have the disposal. And the way the EPR schemes have been implemented so far has really incentivized recycling over reduction. We've been focusing way too much on lightweighting of packaging, which in all the cases is going against the reuse principle, which is above the recycling one, and in most of the cases is also making recycling more difficult. I take the example of the flexible packaging, which is a growing trend, multi-layered packaging that are extremely difficult to recycle, but in the name of the lightweighting and of this very interesting definition of prevention, we are pushing more and more for non-recyclable packaging because they are lightweight. So I think we really have to think about how we use resources and have a responsible design approach and design products to be managed in the best way at their end of life, but also to be durable and reusable. In many cases, recycling has killed reuse. Especially for the beverage packaging. So far, this has not helped to incentivize circular economy. And also, it was put in place for producers to take responsibility in the pollution, or at least the end of life of their products, and we are not yet covering the full cost of the end of life of products with EPR schemes. We are covering part of the waste management costs, so collection and management, and that's why it's highly important to keep in the Single-Use Plastics Directive this reference to a full, or at least a cleanup cost and awareness raising cost coverage by EPR schemes. Because awareness raising is important, of course, but producers have to be responsible of pollution at the end of the chain, because if you don't design a packaging to be collected, it's not going to be collected. So that's very important. Where EPR schemes have helped circular economy and could help more, it's they have created more separate collection, of course, and increased recycling. Where they could help more is really implementing the waste hierarchy and incentivizing real prevention. So where packaging is not necessary, we find other systems. And incentivize reuse, so allow reusable containers to be taken into consideration in the system in a way that we, for small loops, closed loops, we can really decrease the amount of waste produced and handled by the system. Where EPR schemes have been interesting is that they have created this space for dialogue between producers on how to optimize the end of life, but it's a space that can be much better used than it is today to incentivize eco-design. And by eco-design, I mean non-toxicity. So we really have to bring in the debate the toxicity issue, how much chemicals we're using in packaging, how much chemicals we are bringing back in the system through the recycled materials. Our colleagues at Chemtrust have analyzed food contact materials, so packaging, plastic packaging used for food, and found 4,000 chemicals in there. And on those 4,000 chemicals, 150 were considered hazardous for either human health or environmental health. And these chemicals stay in the circular economy if you recycle this packaging. And what's even more concerning is that when the separate collection is not optimized, and you don't have a clean waste stream like you could have if you have deposit refund schemes, for example, you end up mixing plastic waste from packaging with plastic waste from other sources like e-waste, and you get back in the recycled material that we want to use, we want to keep using and use more in new products. You end back with chemicals that were never intended to be used in products that are in contact with human beings. I'm taking the example of the study from Arnica, who studied 400 toys and grooming products and kitchen utensils and found alarming levels of flame retardants that are used in e-waste from the recycled plastic that were used to design those products. And 25% of these 400 products contained those alarming levels, and half of them would never have passed the threshold for the EU POPs regulation. These toys were in kids' mouth. So if we want to use recycled material for packaging and food contact material, we really have to bring in the debate this toxics question and ensure traceability. There is a discussion on a database on substances of very high concern within the ECA right now, and producers are fighting against that, against a mechanism that will allow us to keep trace of all these chemicals all along the value chain and build the trust that we need to build in the recycled material market to increase the intake of recycled content. And we need that because we need to stop relying on fossil fuel or on bio-based plastics that are made out of food scraps and use a lot of pesticides, GMOs, and fertilizers. So we really need to increase that in a way. So EPR schemes should be a space for dialogue on this question. Other criteria that should be used for modulating the producer fee are reusable, so when it's possible, maybe exempting reusable containers, inclusion of recycled content, we talked about it, but also really ensuring that we deal with this question of toxics, and that it's recyclable easily, so really composite materials and multi-layers and all that should really be disincentivized. And that it's resource efficient, that we're using for an application the minimum amount of resources and chemicals in the product. And we need for that guidelines at EU level to harmonize the system and level the playing field for all producers across Europe. Of course, we are waiting for the revision of the essential requirements in 2020, but we can keep doing things before that, because there is sort of an urgency on the plastic pollution issue. So I don't think we should wait for 2020. So that takes me to my last slide. If it comes. I should take it from the... Yes. All right. And I was originally invited to talk about EPR schemes beyond Europe. And one thing is sure is that when we see what's happening outside Europe with packaging and packaging waste, we can notice that EPR schemes on packaging are useful in Europe to at least prevent some disastrous design and some very poor waste management and waste collection systems. But what's very important here is that where there is no mandatory producer responsibility schemes, it means that the products are not made to be recycled or not made to be even collected. And if you look at this picture, it's what you find in most of the Asian supermarkets. You see brands that you know, multinationals that have their headquarters in Europe, that are participating in the EPR discussion in Europe and advocating for circularity, pushing for recycling, pushing for eco-design in a way. But outside our borders, they are putting products on the market that are almost impossible to collect because they are very lightweight, and impossible to recycle because they are multi-layered, very small format, and they have no value for the informal sector. Which brings me to my last point. It's extremely important that we consider the cultural differences of the EPR discussion. It was mentioned that there are some discussions on bringing EPR schemes in Indonesia. The difference with outside Europe is that most of the waste collection and waste management system has been handled in developing countries by the informal sector. And where EPR schemes should be financial in a way where they should contribute to helping this informal sector to structure and start separate collection door to door, like we've seen with many examples in zero waste cities across the world. They're actually taken over from them and privatizing the waste system and taking the income from a lot of people. So it's very important that in any EPR discussion outside our borders, we really take into consideration the cultural differences and the need to not only include the informal sector in the discussion, but also really run the system with them. And that's highly important because we are exporting our poor design, we are exporting our waste. Most of the waste that we actually find in the ocean in those countries is actually coming from us and handled by small businesses. And it's very important that we don't export our bad systems or our system thinking that they could be implemented like that in those countries. So our 3 points, I would say, our 3 messages are that we really need to improve EPR schemes to be a real tool for eco-design and circularity and a real space for discussion on end of life. That we need those EPR schemes to be a real forum to address the chemicals in plastics issue and build the trust we need in the recycled material market. And we really need to apply the same level of responsibility on other markets to really tackle plastic pollution at source. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Levy Alvarez. It was also a very interesting speech with many topics that I think is giving us an opportunity and interest to ask more questions. Unfortunately, time is running again, but I will give the floor and hope that we have a few questions, and I will gather them together so that I don't speak too much in between. So help you to. Yes, we have you, madam, and maybe someone else would like after. No, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So Gwendoline Rioux from European, the European Organization for Packaging and the Environment. So we represent the packaging supply chain from raw material suppliers to brand owners, so the obliged industry who will have to pay the EPR costs. And we are we represent all materials, so not only plastics materials. I have first a comment, because we are talking here about the producers as the sole responsible for the cleanup litter cost. And it's a bit of a pity that there's no producer in the panel, because making the producer the sole responsible for EPR cleanup litter cost doesn't reflect very well the multiple root causes of litter, including improperly functioning infrastructures, consumer misbehavior, the enforcement of existing EU legislation like the wastewater management legislation, for instance. So hence the reason why European and the packaging supply chain, we support a shared responsibility principle, so that which includes all involved actors, so of course the producers, but not only, also including consumers, waste management organizations, local authorities, etc. So this was for the comment. And then the question, if perhaps the Commission could give us more insights into how the cost, the cleanup litter cost, would be calculated, if there's some calculation method to know that. Also knowing that we are talking here about only a few producers of certain single-use plastics items, so not producers of all products, packaging in that regard. So I'd be happy to have some views on that.
Allow me to ask you, you are here from the beginning, I suppose?
Yes.
Yes. So I'm quite sure that you listen, all of us.
Yes.
And you know that we are having now a wider discussion, but we're focusing on the role of extended producer responsibility on EPR schemes. That's why we are discussing about producer responsibility. We are not ignoring the responsibility coming from local, regional authorities, from national authorities, from consumers as well, from individuals. But now we are focusing on a special item.
Yes, but this is an item that was broadly discussed today.
Thank you. And we got also a question for the Commission, but I wonder, maybe I can take one more. And
I just would like to remind you regarding EPR system that at the end, the consumer, if you have a full cost coverage, at the end, this is the consumer who will pay everything, okay? It's included in the price, okay? But I don't want to, I mean, it's a usual discussion about full cost coverage or not, etc., etc. And also regarding awareness campaigns, I really see that it's good, the Eco-Embed initiatives, but please, each actors of the value chain has to have also their responsibility. A producer will never advocate to produce less, okay? Yeah. The job of a producer is produce products. So, okay, also for that, I think that public authorities, they have a key role to play in awareness campaign, financed by the others, but I'm sure that they won't have the same message as the producers, because we are representing the general interest. Thank you.
Thank you. I must say that you were giving the panel some feelings here, and that's good. So, but I know that you also wanted to get the answer from the Commission, and you will get. But I will gather one more question so that I don't consume more time. So we have the gentleman back in the back.
Thank you. I work for the Secretariat of the Committee of the Regions. As a couple of interventions mentioned, this issue has a significant relevance for the local and regional authorities. So I wanted first to remind that the Committee of the Region itself has approved recently an opinion on the single-use plastic and one on the plastic strategy that dealt with the extended producer responsibility and some of the other topics you mentioned. Specifically, I wanted to ask in particular if the issue about the deposit return scheme that you raised now has been analyzed also in terms of an harmonized approach at the EU level. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I got one more, but can you be really short so you will get the floor? And then the Commission will have the opportunity to answer, and I know that you want to go at 2, so I think it will be also a bit of your time from the next panel, and then I will hand over to my colleague, and please.
Joachim Krohn from the Extended Producer Responsibility Alliance. I think a very important point was just made, which is the real discussion. If I understand you right, you want a reduction in our consumption pattern. So we have to change the whole business model. I think this is what we have to discuss. Packaging is now just the victim of a discussion that we are not willing or not brave enough to do. That's my question.
I will now hand over to the Commission. I think we have even more. People feel a lot about this, and I think that's really good. And I think that Madam Spyraki, you will have the opportunity also to talk about this in the next panel, because my colleague here, my colleague member, will host the next panel. So then you will have at least the opportunity. But the Commission, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'll deal with more the technical questions here. Well, yes, I mean, this is, I mean, in terms the question on what is the litter cost, how you come up with it. I mean, this is clearly a question that is a key question that comes up in the negotiations on the single-use plastics proposal, and we have clarified that, I mean, as a first step, you need to identify what is the cleanup activities that we're talking about. So that defines the scope, so the ambition, where you do it, how often you do it. I mean, and these are objectives that have to be set by the member states. And as I mentioned already in my initial speech, that member states already have to do this. They have a legal obligation under the waste legislation to clean up litter. So the scope of those activities is already defined in the national legislation, national level, regional and local level. So that defines the scope of it. And in terms of how we calculate, what's the methodology, how we identify the share of the products, well, this is subject to subsidiarity. We do not define the specific methodologies because depending on the structure of extended producer responsibilities and how they interact with the local authorities that normally would carry out these litter cleanup activities. I mean, these are very specific circumstances, so we do not want to prescribe certain methods. But we already know that it's clear that you could use different sampling methods. The point will be to make sure that they are representative in terms of the pathways, in terms of the pollution, the hotspots. So these, if you do them by samples like we do for already for beach litter cleanup, that actually the sampling that was the basis for the Commission's impact assessment on the directive itself. So it is through the sampling that you identify the products that have this cleanup responsibility, and the objective is that the producers cover the share of the whole litter cost that correspond to their products, not the whole litter cleanup activities as such, of course. So these are the basic principles that also would apply generally to extended producer responsibility schemes when we define cost coverage. So again, you need to identify the service and you need to make sure that it actually represents the necessary costs, so the services that are necessary to achieve the objectives for the EPR schemes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I give an answer to the last question?
Sorry?
Can I give an answer to the last question?
If
Extremely
Madame
short.
Spyraki says yes, it's okay. Otherwise not.
Not even 2 minutes. I'm going to make it shorter. Thank you for bringing the elephant in the room. We are actually talking about consumption and how we have to change our consumption patterns. Yes, you have to change your business models. You will have to change your business models. Those who want to survive have to change their business models, because we can't rely as much we rely today on single use. We can't rely on as many chemicals and resources. And at the end of the day, what you're selling is the product, not the packaging. So really keep that in mind. The packaging is here to bring the product to the consumer, and you have to think about, is that the best way in all cases? And it's not. There are many other ways of packaging products or of distributing products, and people are innovating today. You have new business models, new entrepreneurs every day that are rewarded for their contribution to circular economy. So yes, you will have to change your business models, and it's actually already happening. Even the biggest ones, even the multinationals that are bringing most of the single-use plastic packaged products, are already thinking about refill system, reusable systems, changing the packaging to comply with the waste management system of the region they're putting the product on the market, really studying the consumer habits to embrace the different cultures. So yeah, you will have to change your business models.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was a clear answer. I would like to thank you all for attending this first part of the seminar and the discussion. And I especially would like also to thank the panel. You held excellent and very interesting speeches, and I feel that we will take this with us. And now I will hand over to Madame Spyraki, who is co-hosting this seminar. I didn't mention that in the beginning, but now the floor is yours to take over the leadership in this panel. Thank you.
I would like to invite the next panel Please proceed. It's the producer, textile brand owner Mauer Scalia. It is the wastewater service industry, Oliver Loebel. And it is the NGO, Stephanie Ardidi. And it is the think tank, Susanna Gionfa. Please join us. And we can start. I will stick to the time. 5 minutes for all of us, 5 minutes for questions and answers, and then concluding. Thank you. Allow me to start with Mr. Mauro Scalia. He's the Director of Sustainable Business in Euratex, the European Confederation of Textile and Apparel Industry in Brussels. The floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you very much. I think this slide does not reflect. Yes, thank you. Right. So thanks for the opportunity. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who do not know what Euratex or what the textile industry is all about, we represent the European textile and clothing industry producer, about 177,000 companies, mostly small and medium-sized enterprises, and 1.7 million workers. So we cover the value chain from the fiber to the yarn, to the fabric, to the garment or textile product. We do not cover retailer or distributors. So essentially, there are 2 points I need to touch upon in 5 minutes. One is about microplastic and one is about EPR. I'll try to do my best to give some insight on those. On microplastic, I wanted to mention what we are doing to tackle the issue of microplastic pollution due to washing of synthetic textiles. So when you wash garments, somebody's nodding already in the room, it is known, the media has widely covered this item, microfibers, microplastic are released in the wastewater system, and therefore it can spread over. This is a big issue and it's a big problem. So we have started 1 year ago to team up with 4 other industry associations, Detergent Industry Association, the Sport Goods Industry Association, the Men Fibers, which is also a member of Euratex, and the Outdoor, EOG, to work together to find solution on this problem. And the first thing we work on is to find a harmonized test methods. There's a lot of research out there. You probably came across a lot of published reports. There was something in The Guardian even this morning. But often they compare pears with apples. And we believe that if you don't have a common test methods, it is impossible to compare the issue globally, not just in Europe, but worldwide. And if you don't know where the microplastic come from exactly, you cannot tackle this problem. So we work on that over the last 9 months. We had 2 meetings with scientists of 3 continents, 10 countries. The last meeting took place 10 October, quite recent. And it's very important to see how these researchers for worldwide class facility come together in Brussels to discuss test methods. They did not fight with each other. They did not compete with the best test methods, but they worked together to harmonize one. We're very pleased and confident the result we have achieved so far. We also invite the Commission and some NGO to these meetings, and we made some tweets. I acknowledge our communication still has to be improved, but we are not a PR agency. We are working on this issue. Mostly important on this point, we acknowledge this issue of microplastic, and we did not push the responsibility outside to some other part of the value chain, which is common sometimes. It's a self-defense mechanism, but we wanted to proactively work on that. My second point on EPR, and here I want to mention, after the discussion of today, I think it's important to stress it. Circular economy, it's a mega trend, as Vice President Guteland said. Our sector, textile and clothing, is fully behind that. In our industry, circular economy has already started 50 years ago, when after the wars there was scarcity of materials and we were recycling wool, although you will not say that because recycling was not cool, it was actually something low quality. And we're working more and more. In the last 5 years, if you see what happened, what kind of commitment even fashion brands, some of those have taken, not our membership outside, you'll be quite impressed of these changes. I think that is already happening already. We know there are problems on technical solutions, the quality of recycling, the technology for sorting, the demand is a big issue, but we can already provide solutions for recycled materials. Or we have business models which are based on rental, so much for the consumption reduction that we talked a few minutes before. The issue is that how we improve, how we scale up for what it works only for a few companies nowadays, but can work for a whole systemic industry. As the even Ellen MacArthur Foundation clearly said, we need a systemic change. You do not need to copy and paste something which only works in a few companies. You need to change the whole sector. So this is where I think what we need to be aware of. EPR can be a problem or can be a part of the solutions. It depends how we use it. It is essentially a tool to incentivize and find good solutions. A lot of things are already happening, not just in Europe, but worldwide. I think what we should reflect upon is what is the role of the EPR experiences from other countries or even other sectors that we can be inspired of. And let's think about France. Some of you may know for 11 years EPR scheme already exists in France. And they have a lot of experience. And I quote, one of the issues that they raise is that EPR schemes in our sector works only, it makes sense if we are able to connect the integrator of recycled materials and the manufacturing of these materials. So the devil is in the detail. It's not so much to agree on policy messages. So in conclusion, my 3 points, and I hope I'm still in time. We believe we need to work based on facts. If it is about microplastic, we need to start from science-based research, harmonize as much as possible, understand where the sources of the problem are, and from there up take political decision. But we need to start from the actual facts. On circular economy, we should really look at what is already happening. What are the problems identified from these sectors? Because less production, pollution prevention of recyclable materials and textile is different from steel or glass or other type of plastic. And the last point is that Europe is, of course, part of the world, and I'm glad that it was already mentioned, the global view, many times this morning. So we should not try to push the problem outside Europe, but we shall find solutions which can inspire others and can be copied elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I finally was wondering if someone will focus on EPR, and you did it. Well, I will give the floor to Mr. Oliver Lobel. He is the Secretary General of EUO, Wastewater Service Industry. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to start my short intervention, first of all, by introducing who we are. So EURO is the European Association representing drinking water and wastewater operators from 29 European countries. Second introductory point, I think very important, is a reference to the treaty, so which is the very basis of European legislation, of all European legislation. And if you look at the wording of Article 191, you find many of the answers to today's discussion. The treaty clearly says that environmental damage should, as a priority, be rectified at the source and that the polluter should pay. So this, I think, is very important when we look at further actions. Now it's interesting to look, I also stick to the textile examples because we are together in a panel here. How does it work for wastewater industry, textile, what are pathways, what are possible actions? I think it's interesting because it's different from what we heard before. So this is a very simplified view of the supply chain, let's say, focusing on fiber emissions. So you have the clothing producer, the garment producer, then you have the use phase. During the use phase, you have normal wear and tear, you have washing, and this leads to emissions. You will have a few fiber emissions to the air. You will have many more fiber emissions to the sewer network. Most of them will end up in the wastewater treatment plant. The wastewater treatment plant will remove the overwhelming majority of them, but not all. So some of them may be emitted into the aquatic environment and from there also to the maritime environment. In line with the treaty, I firmly believe that the starting point must be control at source. This means eco-design, so designing products that do not emit or do emit very few synthetic fibers. Innovation, perhaps also really limitation, setting upper limits of fiber emissions. So again, source control is always more important than trying to remove pollution at a later stage. And in charge of source control is, of course, the producer, so this cannot be denied. He's the only one, or he's the one that designs the product, that tests the product. He knows how it performs. And he markets the product, and quite legitimately, he wants to make money with the product. So this is normal, and but needs to be taken into account. If you now look at the wastewater treatment plant, if we can look at it. No, we cannot. Okay. Wastewater treatment plant. We are like the final barrier between human activity and nature, including the aquatic environment. We do not know the products that are put on the market. We do not know how they perform. And if we are obliged to put in place extra treatment, for example, filtering out the remaining fibers that are not filtered out today, then of course this will affect, first of all, the price of water services. It will increase our own energy use, so it will also have an impact on our eco-balance. And last but not least, it will further pollute the sludge that we produce and leaving us less options in implementing circular economy solutions. The only option that might be left at the end of the day is incineration if the sludge is too polluted. And that's where we believe EPR must come in. So if source control doesn't work, then EPR measures need to be taken at other steps of the supply chain. And there are different levels. So it could be, of course, at the level of the use phase. So there are washing machines which could be equipped, there are projects going on to filter out synthetic fibers. Or in certain cases, there might be a requirement to treat at the level of the wastewater treatment plant. But these costs, additional costs for downstream members of the supply chain cannot be put on their shoulders. They must be borne by the producer. To conclude, what is a public service? And we had a lot of discussion on prices, on costs, when we discussed the Drinking Water Directive. So members of the European Parliament were very passionate about the question, what do additional measures cost to the water user, the user of water services? So the question that I really ask is, do we want to effectively implement the polluter pays principle or the water consumer pays principle? I think the first should be the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have NGO. Stefan Andrite is the Policy Manager on Circular Economy Products and Waste at European Environmental Bureau. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Just presenting very quickly the European Environmental Bureau to start with. We are NGO umbrella working at EU level and gathering together now 150 members across Europe. We were founded in 1974. I think I will not be so innovative in my presentation because the two previous speakers, and even in the previous session, everybody was speaking about eco-design and trying to change and, in fact, rather design better rather than depollute. I think this is an excellent principle. The point is, as I'm personally involved in the eco-design development, so really the sole EU policy we've got on this, I can tell you that there is a big difference between all these people calling for eco-design and the reluctance to implement some very basic rules. So I'd like that we take seriously what we say, because I think there is a risk with the circular economy is that most people say, yes, we embrace it. Yes, we do it. But in fact, they don't change anything. And when you try to really challenge them and say, okay, so let's think together in proper multi-stakeholder forum, at the end of the day, the result is always the same, that they are not moving as quickly as needed. So I'd like to set our goal. So how can we make microfiber leakage history? I think we should not aim for anything but this, okay? And I think we should not be too demanding, sorry, but quite because there are possible solutions which have been documented, in fact, by some EU-funded project. So I think there are temporary solutions around filtering that can have a cost, but that may not be, I would say, the long-term solution. And there are solutions around design and around consumption and new business model. And I think that's what we need to investigate. Once saying this, then what's the role of EPR? I think as everyone, I reckon that EPR is part of the solution. We've got the example in the French system with pros and cons, and being French myself, there are a lot of things we can also improve to this existing system. But I think at some point today, I do not see the microfibers issue being captured by any schemes, So, for example, if I turn to you as a consumer, do you have any information about the clothes you wear? Apart the basic material. But do you know the chemicals you've got on your skin at the moment? Do you know how many microfibers you will release every time you wash your... So I think we need to be clear that EPR is part of the solution and that the criteria on which we will develop EPR can be the same criteria on which we will set some eco-design requirement and on which we will inform consumer. And at the moment, I hear a lot about what the people do in their business, but as a consumer, I still have no information. And I think that's pretty worrying. So my three key message is that microfibers is the main contributor to microplastic. According to the figures, it can range from 30 to 60% of microplastic in the ocean. Okay? And we should act at design stage and manufacturing stage rather than trying to depollute. But we should act seriously, not saying we're going to act, but acting. Second thing, we need to set the EPR for clothes and textile. And the main reason may not be the microfiber issue, but the obligation will have to set separate collection for textile by 2025 now. So we will need this because who in this room can say that we will have increased the recycling and collection rate without, the EPR system? So there is no doubt that we need that for textile. And the big suggestion is, can we immediately inject a criteria around microfiber release in this? And for those companies that will make efforts to release less microfibers through design, they should be one or another rewarded through the modulation that has been mentioned several times. And then now I'm super happy that it looks like we're going to have a standard, a testing standard. So that means one of the major difficulty is now, I would say, removed. So I just call everyone to say, okay, being ideally at EU level, but if not at national level, can we then immediately consider setting this EPR scheme for textile? Thank you very much.
The lady of our team is Madame Susanna Gionfa. She's policy analyst to IEP. Can you explain us the acronym, please? It is a think tank, of course.
Yes.
Please give us some details. Thank you
for inviting me. IEP stands for the Institute for European Environmental Policy. It's a sustainability think tank. I have a presentation somewhere.
Yes.
Yes?
Maybe we can ask some help.
Okay, then too far ahead. No, this is the end. No, you know everything already. Okay, I'm just going to start by saying that a lot of the points I wanted to cover have already been covered, of course. But at IEP, we have carried out some research on the potential role of extended producer responsibility to make a change at the design stage. So I think this is very key to the topic of this panel. And we have focused a lot on plastic packaging, but obviously the scope of EPR goes beyond plastics. So we have seen in Europe several extended producer responsibility schemes being applied to a number of product groups. Some of these have some weaknesses, and some of these have also delivered a number of benefits. So if we look at the more efficient separate collection, the reduction in disposal, in some cases increasing recycling, and reducing the burden on public budgets for municipal waste management. But they haven't been ambitious enough, in my opinion. What we want to achieve is to trigger change at the very design stage, because at this stage is where producers make the decisions upon the reusability, the recyclability, the repairability, separability of the products that they make in the market. So an input from EPR schemes to trigger change through financial incentives at this stage is key. And one example, which has also already been mentioned, is the eco-modulation of fees based on eco-criteria, on circularity criteria. I've included here CONA is the Italian PRO for packaging. The reason why I mentioned them is because in 2018, in January, they introduced fee modulations, differentiations based on the separability and recyclability of their packaging. What it needs to happen now, and not just in this case, is that the difference in the fees rate is large enough to trigger change. But now I want to focus on another part of the topic of this panel, which is microplastics, which is strictly linked here to the design of the products. So I want to focus on the microplastics that are generated during the life cycle of products, and of those products that are leak to the environment and then fragment into smaller pieces that are microplastics. I think when looking into microplastics, it's important to keep in mind what are the key sources. And we have talked today about textiles, we've talked about packaging, but there's also tires, there's also fishing gears and agricultural films. So I think EPR, if made more ambitious and properly applied to these product groups, can really bring innovation in the sense that can really trigger change in the design, and changes that happen at the design stage, if based on the criteria that I mentioned before, then can have benefits lower down the value chain. And this is key to address microplastics, of course. Sorry. Yeah. My last point is that I think we should really look at the bigger picture. When we talk about marine litter, of course, we also think of the products that are produced, consumed, and disposed of on land, and that then leak to the aquatic environment and potentially to the marine environment. And that's 80%. And same is for microplastics, that's 80% coming from land. I think it's important to keep in mind also what is the rate of fragmentation of products in land and in water. Is actually different. It's faster on land than in water. It's faster on the beach than in water. So that's also something to keep in mind. And also, when I say looking at the bigger picture, I mean when we want to apply extended producer responsibility schemes and we want to trigger change at the design stage, we need to know what are the product groups that we want to tackle, where are microplastics coming from, and what are the criteria that we want to be applied in the products that we place on the market. And I have included one example which has not yet been mentioned, and it's the application of plastics to agriculture, which is increasing every day. And I'm talking about, for instance, plastic greenhouses, plastic mulches, agricultural films, polytunnels. There's also the application of sewage sludge to land as a fertilizer, which often contains microplastics. This is a topic that has been widely unexplored because the focus has been so much on water, but there are actually more microplastics in the soil than in water, and we shouldn't forget that. And so just to take the example of agricultural films, in Europe these are widely used because they're very useful for the productivity of the crops. But also what happens is that 32% of these agricultural films that are made of plastics that are used in Europe are collected at the end of use. The rest is burned, the rest is landfilled or left on land. And obviously it will degrade, it will fragment into smaller pieces, it will leak to the nearby aquatic environments, it will reach our oceans. So I think it's important to keep in mind these sources, and it's important to keep in mind this as a reason to apply extended producer responsibility to these product groups. And they already exist in Europe, EPR schemes for agricultural films in several member states, I think in Belgium, in Italy, and France. I don't know exactly the criteria that are used in these types of schemes, but I think when really looking at what are the sources of microplastics in these products, then that's where we should try to impose those criteria. So in the case of agricultural films, make them more resistant, more durable. And then obviously this would have to be combined with, I don't know, take-back schemes or proper recycling infrastructure, proper collection infrastructure, and all those other interesting inputs that have been mentioned today. So thanks.
Thank you. And now it's the time for questions and answers. We have maybe more than 5 minutes, 7 minutes, and we are ready to receive your questions. Please. Yes, please.
I just wanted to ask regarding eco-design. We briefly mentioned it, and as we're talking about product design, there has been discussion about extending the scope of the eco-design directive to non-energy related products and also including resource efficiency criteria. So maybe a question for Stefan, knowing where we are with that and what concrete tools we will have in the future to address product design issues.
Okay, thank you for the question. So for those who do not know, eco-design is the nickname of a directive applying to electric and electronic product. And in fact, this is the unique tool, and it's really an added value because it targets the single market that set some design requirement for product being placed on the market with this really strong environmental view, because of course we've got a lot of requirement for safety or toxicity of product. And today the Commission is questioning what they call a more consistent product policy framework. And of course it would make sense, according to me, that more product that only energy and electronic product, energy-related product are covered by the same type of scheme. Now, what's the best approach? And I know that in this House, the European Parliament, some of you have called for putting more things on the scope of eco-design, and to completely say, why do we have to limit the scope of eco-design to energy-related product? This is a question. I don't have a certain answer. I just want you to realize when we start placing a product on the work plan for eco-design, it's only 8 years later that we've got the implementation of the mandatory requirement. And this is based on the prioritization of the environmental impact. So if we place all the product on the market, notably something like, plastic product or a pair of shoes, before it is prioritized as having the most significant impact to be considered under the eco-design, it will be another 10 years. Then we need 8 years to regulate. That means nothing will happen if we simply place shoes under eco-design. So there is only one solution, is that the sector, according to a multi-sector platform, start designing the criteria on which they would be evaluated as what are the minimum criteria we need to respect to place product on the market to create the level playing field, and according to this criteria, what kind of economic incentive we can consider for our sector. And this should be done in parallel, okay, and as part of the product policy framework. So my answer is, if we go to place shoes and clothes under eco-design, that means that, in fact, we don't want to act. We just want to delay strategy. If we want to act in the next 10 years, we have to consider how we can target in parallel different sectors and not putting everything in the same channel, because the bottleneck will be the resource dedication by the European Commission to this policy. But I'm super happy to hear my colleague from Eurotex and to say, what is your view on, eco-design, on extended producer responsibility covering including the filtering at the waste water treatment plant, and about the injection of these microfibers criteria into the picture. Sorry, I took the
it was very, very interesting, but I would like to ask for further questions, please, the lady.
Good afternoon, Kathleen Lacey, working for Action Europe. I am a little surprised to hear so little today talk about research and innovation. We're talking about EPR, and it's the producer's responsibility, but isn't it also the producer's responsibility on top of eco-design and changing the way the business is done to also look for new potentials, new possibilities? And I'm worried that this is something that is sometimes seen as very scary, because we absolutely don't have to look for new ways of doing. We just need to change the mentality, to change the consumption. But we're very worried by having new materials. And I want to take here the perfect example, I think, in this SUP directive. The European Commission has opened the door very much to research and innovation, and it has even given the possibility to set up a new standard on biodegradable plastics. And this has been totally discarded by the Parliament for a reason that I still don't understand, because in a way, what is requested here by the Commission is to leave the door open to set criteria to decide what is considered as or what is not considered as biodegradable. We made a big mistake with the oxo-degradables. Nothing ever, there was never a criteria to say which product is or is not an oxo-degradable, and today we have a massive issue in front of us. So what is so scary about setting norms that can actually give security and confidence to producers to continue research on some materials? Thank you.
Well, allow me to answer to this question, and allow me to take a look and looking to the glass. I think that it is half full, not half empty. Because according to my office, it is estimated that improved collection facilities for plastics and scaling up recycling will save around 100 per ton collected. And there are two programs. One is the Horizon 2020 program, that it will have additional 100 millions for research and innovation concerning plastic. And in addition to over 250 millions already invested for extra funds towards financing the development of smarter and more recyclable materials. So let's take a look on the glass and think it is half full. And let's work on the existing opportunities that we have. Of course, we have also a call coming from the European Investment Bank that has set up the Circular Economy Finance Support Platform. It is important to know that we have to blend the funding coming from MFF, coming from Horizon or next MFF 2070, of course coming from the private sector and coming from the European Investment Bank or the InvestEU. So we have, I think, enough funding support in order to go ahead with research and innovation in the EU. The question for me is the outcome of this R&D. And this is the case for me. The outcome of the R&D and how can we commercialize the product.
Just to briefly add something. I personally value a lot the potential of research and innovation. I know as a fact that there's a lot happening for bio-based and biodegradable plastics. People are developing new materials, but I think there is an issue here, and it's linked to the fact that improvements in the biodegradability of plastics can lead to misleading behaviors, in the sense that if we're making materials that will more likely biodegrade, for instance, in the marine environment, and we're sort of telling people that it's okay to throw plastics in the oceans. And what we're trying to do now is to change behaviors, change the behavior of consumers. So we need to be very careful when looking into research and innovation. It has to be in the right way and apply to the right things. I am not saying that we shouldn't look into bio-based. I'm just saying it's not so obvious. Yeah.
Can I please just very quickly reply to that? Sorry. I'm sorry, but I don't understand this argument, because at the end of the day, Europe is only one small continent in the world, okay? So as much as we do amazing legislation, this will not apply to the rest of the world. Today, Europe has the chance to also come up with new materials that will be able to be exported and to set also new business lines throughout the world. And to say that the consumer will simply throw away its, I don't know, cup or bag, or, I'm sorry, it's still a problem of awareness and of behavior. And if we are to think of a material that is to be found in the water, would you prefer to have one that takes 1,000 years to degrade and then to probably turn into microplastics that are in our food chain? Or do you prefer to have a material that biodegrades within 6 months? And this is the whole point. So things will still, unfortunately, people will always have bad behaviors, and we will have to find solutions. So why closing the door to not the solution, but potentially one of the solutions?
Well, we have additional answers, I suppose.
A couple of reactions, starting from the lady about research innovation. You say it's a producer responsibility. That to me is a strange statement, because I don't know in other sectors, but in our industry, research and innovation is what makes the difference between you being competitive or close down the next day. So the companies in the textile and apparel industry need to innovate every 6 months, every 3 weeks, otherwise they're out. And it also goes in materials. I mean, you can buy fabrics made with orange shells, which are transformed into sugar, which then transform into fibers, which is then made into garment. Problem is that it's more expensive. And most of us will not pay the price for that. So this is when I said we need to have research to find solutions, then we need to scale this up. On other comments made before, immediate force criteria, that's what I heard. Well, this was done in California a year ago. They put a label saying this fabric contains up to whatever % of synthetic fibers, hand washing is recommended. This proposal was wiped out quickly. Because if you recommend somebody not to wash in the washing machine, but hand washing, which means this, perhaps you might release more microplastic than the machine itself. So the point is, how do you strike the balance between the urgency to do something, because we cannot wait 10 years, I fully agree on you with that, but we can also need to act based on facts, on research results, because we cannot afford the luxury of making legislation which tells the consumer with a label, for instance, that is something which is absolutely pointless, and therefore it was withdrawn back a few months later. And on the other hand, what they encouraged, both California, Massachusetts, and I think another state, was to launch discussion between the suppliers, the manufacturers, the brands, to find technical solutions, because this is what we need in microplastic pollution. We need to find what the solutions are. And that it's much more urgent. We cannot wait 10 years on legislation. And the same goes with standards. An official standard takes years to be approved by ISO or by SEN, for those of you with are familiar. We launch a technical discussion which in 9 months already produce a framework to agree on something. Again, if that has to become a legal requirement, we'll have to go through SEN. But we started already now. So the message I give is we need to look at what legislative options we have. But we do not have to waste time on discussing on principle. We need to look at what the solution possibilities are. That's, I think, what is important. And last point, we shall not, as I said at the beginning, push the responsibility towards other stakeholders. It's easy for us to say, put a filter in the washing machine. Right. Then the filter is taken out and is washed in the sink, and then it goes back in the wastewater system, somebody says. And we did not talk about the wastewater treatments. Again, think about there are 22 billion of textile and clothing items in the market every year. So we need to think about what are the best realistic solutions, but not pushing the problem. This is not my business. Somebody else should do that. We should work together on this. That's my point.
Thank you. Yeah, I can support a lot that Mauro has said, which is already an excellent start. Perhaps I wasn't very clear in my intervention, but I think innovation is key, and all EPR schemes should stimulate innovation and reward those who come up with innovative products on the market. So if we have, for example, garments that emit fewer synthetic fibers, they should be rewarded, because if you have a modular scheme, for example, relating to emission levels, you will pay less if you emit less. So I think that's a very strong incentive also for companies to innovate. How to make the consumer aware of it is, of course, a big problem. I think labeling has its role to play there. Perhaps it needs to be simple, like a traffic light, red, yellow, green, or so, something very simple. It could have a very strong impact because people can identify it immediately, saying, well, this product, it's very nice, it's cheap, but it has a stronger impact on the environment. So perhaps something can be done there very quickly also by voluntary agreements on the industry side. Thank you.
As I can see, there are no questions. No more questions, I suppose, but you would like to
I'd like to
give an additional answer.
It's just an addition. I think, and I'm sorry to be a bit the devil advocate here, but I think we tend to give too much to innovation, as if innovation per se were good. So now, last time that they've got digital bra now, for women, they've got a chipset in your bra and it is supposed to vibrate when you're really in love and not when you're not. So this is innovation. Wow, super good. Let's put a lot of nanomaterials, in our stuff so that the shirts will iron by themselves and no matter what. So I think we got to be careful. I think, as far as I know, the best driver for innovation has been regulation. I'm sorry to say that. This is what we can see. Because we have EPR, and if we create the economic incentive, the people will be innovative to try to not spend. But I'd like to take that as an opportunity that being for plastic, as was in the first panel, or for clothes or textile, which was the main focus of the second panel, I think we also have to see how we can then innovate for that in terms of more durable, more longer lasting, more new business model that will go toward really a kind of reduction of usage of resources, which should not be understood, and I think that's really an error, as reduction of pleasure, reduction of freedom of choice. I'm sorry, today I've got very little choice if I've got different children and I want to have, a leasing scheme. There are a few, but not so much when for my children I will not pay a fortune for super high quality clothes because, after 6 months they're gone, so I would prefer to have something more practical. And I think this is the part of innovation which is not really explored at the moment. So let's stop putting chipset in a bra and let's explore how we can, for example, and that's a challenge for a designer, have a bra that can evolve according to how the breast evolve, for example. Thank you.
Well, it was an interesting answer. Allow me to conclude this debate. Well, I was prepared for a very, very detailed presentation with numbers, etc. I will skip the most of them, but I would like to start with an outcome coming from our meeting, coming from our debate. We are all agree here in this room that we have to have a more strengthened policy approach to tackle marine litter, and especially to use extended producer responsibility as a branch of this scope. Starting with some numbers, about 63% of the plastic waste collected and recycled is treated in the European Union. The remaining is 37% and it is exported. It is estimated that 2 to 5% of plastic produced end up in oceans, causing adverse effects in coastal and marine ecosystem. You know that we all know that what is EPR, and we insist that first is to provide incentives for the manufacturers to design resource-efficient and low-impact products. We here said that it is important to know the minimum criteria in every sector for eco-design and not putting everything at the same pipeline, as you have already mentioned. And the second, of course, is to ensure effective end-of-life collection, environmentally sound treatment of collected products and improvement, reuse and recycling. I would like to say just two numbers. In 2014, 30% of 25.8 million tons of post-consumer plastic waste generated was recycled and 40% was incinerated with energy recovery. Well, first of all, we have plastic packaging waste, and that's why I was telling my colleague in the panel that we are not fully against the consuming. We are trying to change the consumer model, and this is the case for us. Packages is the highest rate, packages shows the highest rate of recycling of all plastic application, reaching 40% at the year 2015. Although this is a low figure comparing with other figures, 65% is the recycling rates achieved when all packaging materials are taken into account. We have, of course, EPR in 26 of 28 member states, and we have packaging schemes in the EU, including some very basic fee modulation, since they charge different fees to producers for each packaging material. Of course, we can say that plastic is charging more than paper, card, glass, and metals, and we have a few schemes, only a few schemes, that they have more advanced eco-modulation of fees. And this is one point that we have to stay. Of course, EPR schemes are associated with a range of benefits which contribute moving towards more sustainable production and consumption. In particular, EPR has contributed to the creation of more and more efficient separate collection schemes for specific waste streams, including plastic packages. It has also provided financial benefits by shifting financial responsibility from the end-of-life waste phase of products from local municipalities and public authorities to producers. EPR typically reduces the burden of public budget. Moreover, EPR helps to generate separate high-quality waste materials, which can use it and we can reuse it. And of course, EPR, despite all, they have a lot of disadvantages that we have to tackle. The difference is in existing schemes, and the general lack of data, it's something that we have to bridge immediately. Secondly, recycling targets. It is a common goal, but we have to take into account a lot of issues talking about recycling targets. And third, it's a fee modulation mechanism that it can provide the motivation to the producers, it can provide the motivation to the consumers as well. Third, it is the plastic strategy that we have. The plastic strategy that we have is, of course, one first answer coming from the Commission, from the Parliament. We vote for the plastic strategy and we will vote for or against during the plenary on December. But we have to take into account that we will have better business, but we have to have also better consumer model. And this is my conclusion, and I would like to conclude with this. I am one of the strongest believer in raising awareness of the people, in raising awareness of the local authorities, of the regional authorities, but for the consumers as well. That's why one of my initiatives was the so-called Fish or Plastic campaign that has been endorsed by Vice President Katainen, and it is supported by my two colleagues coming from Portugal, Sofia Ribeiro, and from Finland, Hanna Virkunen. We all say that we can ask the people, we can educate the people how harmful it is for using one single-use plastic, and how can they reduce single-use plastic by using something that it is recyclable and it is reusable. And we start with small islands, and now we are going ahead. So, for concluding this kind of debate, I would like to say that we have to work jointly. We have to work together, the Commission, the Parliament, the national, the regional, the local authorities, but we have to raise awareness of the people. It is the first. Secondly, is the simplification. We have to simplify our message. We have to explain to the people who is benefiting from our initiatives. And of course, we have to connect in a way, to make something like a European umbrella for our EPR schemes in order to have much better results. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you very much, all of you.
When you're in love.
When you're in love. So that's the just look on the agenda.
That sounds like
Maria, you heard about that? Yeah. Everybody's heard about it, except the colloquial. It's not made in Europe.
It's something that is
It's not which compliant, I'm not interested. It's not which compliant.
I'm glad to know it's come from Japan. I'm glad to know.
That's the only time we discuss with our members.